Isn't it just amazing to be out now? We have been in these physically confined spaces for so long now, almost 2 years, and now we're all here. And I just want to welcome all of you, and I want to welcome the people in the ante-rooms as well watching this. So welcome to everybody. It's just great. We have been in these confined physical spaces, but I'd like to ask all of you to think about this just for a second. Have you also been in a mentally confined space? It would make perfect sense if you were, because of COVID, of course, because of the media, of course, because of social unrest, of course. All of those things will keep this drawbridge that we have pretty tightly shut, right? We might call that drawbridge the ego. And the ego is like this great mental immune system that we have. You know, it's good. It's good to have an ego. At the same time, if we keep our drawbridge totally closed, that's not good for us, right? We may every once in a while open this drawbridge, but what do we look at? We look at media that agrees with us. We look at friends that agree with us. Everybody else, oh yeah, you're right. We live in this filter bubble, right? And it's been worse now lately. So when that's happening, when all of this stuff is happening around us over the last 2 years, we have to think, and I have to think as a public health expert, what's happening to our mental state right now? I was in a difficult mental state about 10 years ago. I was in my own castle with my drawbridge firmly closed when my daughter Julia passed away at the age of 19. And she died very suddenly and of a heart attack. And when that happened, I kind of lost my own direction, my own purpose. And when that happened after that, I started finding myself in this very dark, dark castle that I couldn't get out of. I went up to northern Michigan about a month after she died, and my wife stayed at home, and she was a gardener and a sculptor, and she's here, and she's awesome. And I went up to northern Michigan and stayed in a cottage by Lake Michigan. And I started eating and drinking myself to death, pretty much. And I started just watching whatever agreed with me, of course. I started deteriorating, frankly. And then somebody sent me, messages like, we'd like to help you. You seem to be having a hard time. And written on all the stones on my castle wall were, go away. Just think about this in terms of the pandemic and how you might be during that pandemic when everything is closed off. Go away. Me? I'm not a problem. You are maybe the problem, but not me. And then somebody sent me this book by the 13th century poet named Rumi. He's a Persian poet, and I never read poetry. I'm not a person who would engage or be moved by most poetry, even though every once in a while I try. The very first poem that I read, and the very first 2 sentences I read, were like a letter from the 13th century to me, Vic Strecher. And it said, the breeze at dawn has secrets to tell you. Don't go back to sleep. I woke up the next morning and I looked out, and it was a beautiful, perfect day at 5 o'clock in the morning, just starting to get the sun up. And I looked out and it was so smooth, and while I wanted to go back to sleep, I thought, maybe I shouldn't. Maybe I should listen to that poem that I was just reading the night before. And I jumped in my kayak, and I was just in my underwear and t-shirt, and I know that's too much information, but I just thought, just to let you know, it's about 45 degrees outside, and I didn't put a life jacket on. In fact, I was just a total idiot, because I just jumped in, and I frankly didn't care. I just didn't care about living, honestly. And I just started paddling out, and I kept paddling, and it was so beautiful, glassy smooth. I just kept paddling out, and then the sun started coming up. And I felt that I was at a crossroads suddenly. I felt my daughter, and I don't know how to explain this, I'm a scientist, and I don't know how to explain it, but I felt my daughter Julia saying, Dad, you need to get over this. And it wasn't like, you need to get over this, it was like, you need to get over this. You need to get over your grief in some way. So I went back to the University of Michigan. I said, this is so nice you let me take off this semester and maybe even future semesters, because I know you're concerned about me and what's happening to me. But actually, that's the worst advice that I could get. What I need to do is go back and teach. And I'm going to teach people in a new way. I'm going to teach health and public health in a new way. I'm not going to be so focused on disease and death, morbidity and mortality. I'm going to be focused on life and well-being. And I'm going to teach in a totally different way. And I'm going to teach my students as if each one is my own daughter, Julia. And when that happened, I started rising above my castle wall because I stopped thinking about myself and I started thinking about my students, my community, many, many other things. I started thinking in a different way totally. And I started reading. I started reading everything from 2,400 years ago, Aristotle's Nicomachean Ethics, all the way to the latest research in neuroscience, looking at how people make changes. And I had some friends and colleagues who are neuroscientists, and I reached out to them and said, tell me more about the brain. I'd like to learn more about the brain. So I talked to Emily Falk and Una Kang, who are both at Penn, University of Pennsylvania, and they said, oh yeah, we'd love to work with you. So we put people in the MRI and we started asking them to think, while they're in MRI, magnetic resonance imaging, to think more about their transcending, purposeful core values, what's important to them. And sure enough, more blood flow, more oxygenated blood flow went to this part of the brain called the ventral medial prefrontal cortex. There will be a test later, okay? So remember that. VMPFC, ventral medial prefrontal cortex. It's one of the most modern parts of our brain, very human part of our brain, and it relates to our identity. When we're asked to think about ourselves, who we are, this part of the brain lights up. And when we think about our core values, this part of the brain lights up. When we think about our future orientation, that part of the brain lights up. Very modern part of the brain. And at the same time, when they're thinking about these purposeful, transcending values, the part of the brain that's very ancient, very reptilian, dinosaurs had amygdala, 150 million years ago. That part of the brain relates to threat, relates to aggression, relates to fear, and that gets less blood flow. So that gets tamped down when you're thinking about these transcending things. Now, how does that make sense to anybody? Well, let's think about our emotions just for a second. So I'm really honored to be able to work with Ethan Cross. He directs the emotions lab at the University of Michigan. And so I said, Ethan, let's look at the coping strategies that you recommend to people that you study, good coping strategies, and then the coping strategies that don't work so well. Let's take a look at that among people who have a lot of purpose. It turns out people with a lot of purpose and direction in their life know that it won't last. See a big picture, engage in family or religious rituals, go out and walk in nature. Whereas people with a low purpose, when they're stressed out, what happens to them? They eat more, they drink more alcohol, they vent. These are not good, and they lead to greater depression and anxiety. We've known this for years now. How about our openness? If we're transcending our castle walls, can we see more clearly? Do we understand diversity, for example? So I talked to my friend Tony Burrow at Cornell, and he had run a study with white adults, asking them, just over the next 5 minutes, think about your purpose in life, and maybe write it down. The other group, think about your daily routine. That's a control condition, and maybe write that down. 5 minutes in each group. Then he gives both of them a map, and one map is all white people practically, represented by all of these dots up here, these blue dots. They're all white people. Do you want to live in that city? Or do you want to live in this city that's very diverse, represented by all these colors? The people who just thought for 5 minutes about their purpose in life were 4 times more likely to prefer living in the ethnically diverse city. It's pretty powerful what purpose does. How about our health? What's going on with our health? We know that if we have, these are 2 people that I work with, Eric Kim and Steve Cole from UCLA. We know that if we have a weak purpose in our lives, we have more pro-inflammatory cell production. That's not good. Our genes literally start expressing more pro-inflammatory cell production. Inflammation is really like the fertilizer of chronic disease. It's not good in a pandemic either, by the way. If we have a strong purpose in life, a strong direction, we have more antivirals produced. That's good in a pandemic, right? So that's good for us overall. We also find that people with strong purpose kick in behaviors that lead them to become more purposeful. And it's not for them. They're not engaging in these behaviors to be healthier themselves. They're engaging in these behaviors to be more purposeful for other people, have this transcending purpose. So we see people with strong purpose hydrating more, or meditating more, loving more, or napping and sleeping better. All of these things are better because they have strong purpose in their lives, and they need that. So to summarize, my purpose is to help other people find their own authentic purpose in life. If you're wondering, how do I do that? First ask this question: what matters most to me? What are the things that matter most to me? And you might find that the things that matter most to you are not things. They're people. they're causes. And as we're getting out of this pandemic, and as we're getting, hopefully transcending our castle walls, as this pandemic is slowly waning, maybe we start thinking about what matters most. Have we learned anything from the pandemic? Have we learned anything about who relies on us? It might be our mom, it might be our spouse, it might be our cat. We don't know. Set a goal around those things that matter most and who relies on you. What causes do you care about? You've probably discovered new causes during this pandemic that could be really important for you. And then, how do you want to be remembered? Jonas Salk once said, late in his life, that we should be good ancestors. 200 years from now, looking back in your life, how do you want to be remembered? That's really important in finding your purpose. My purpose is multifaceted, just as yours, I'm sure, is. So to teach every student as if they're my own child is important. I'm not perfect at that. Ask my students, but I do my best. That's an aspiration. And then finally, to be a good family person. So I was in this very dark place, very dark place. And because of my daughter, who lives in me every single day, I don't go back to sleep. And I hope you don't go back to sleep. I hope all of you are able to transcend. Because when you transcend, you find other people who are transcending. Because they're all in these balloons over their castle walls. And you will find other people like that. And I hope all of you are able to do that today. I want to thank my fellow transcenders, because science isn't done with just one person. It's done with teams. It's done with diverse teams, with diverse disciplines, with diverse opinions and ideas and backgrounds. And that's how real science is done. And so I want to really extend gratitude to this entire team. I want to extend gratitude to all of you. I hope all of us today especially can transcend and find our purpose in life. Thank you so much.